All right, so symbols. We went over this briefly when we did the animation for the spaceships, because in order to tween anything, you have to have a symbol. It can't just be a shape you've drawn. It can't even be something if you had object drawing turned on, right? It has to be specifically a symbol. So I just have a little square right here. We're going to go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and I'm just going to call it square. You want to make sure you always, name these things. And we're going to always stick with, who cares? We're going to always stick with a movie clip unless there's a very specific reason not to, and we'll get into why later. All right, so I hit OK, right? And now I could, animate this or whatever I need to. But there's something else that I can do with this, right? So I've got something, it's a movie clip. It says so right here under properties, it's a movie clip. And one of the things that comes into effect is effects and filters and lots of interesting things that you can do in terms of, having something tint from one color to the other, or having the alpha channel turn on and off. So there's all those types of things you can animate as well, but it has to be a movie clip. You'll see one of the options is graphic. That won't cut it. It has to be a movie clip. But the most powerful part about movie clips is if we double click on it, right, we're now inside it. I've got that square, which means I could, change it to whatever color I want. That's interesting. There we go. And you can see here it says we're inside the square. That is inside scene 1. If you want to get out, you just click on scene 1. Or you double click somewhere that's blank. Brings you back out. But you'll also see there's still a timeline, right? So I can create animation inside a movie clip, and Flash will take anything that's inside a movie clip and just constantly loop it. So it's really useful for, say, if I want this to spin. I can take this and I gotta hit F8, which is the hotkey for turning it into a symbol, because it has to be a symbol in order for me to animate it. So let's see, we're gonna call it spin. That's not how you spell spin. Calling it inside, so I know it's, the interior movie clip of the two, right? And so now that I've done that, I can go to here and I can hit F5 for new frames, right click, create motion tween, and I'm just gonna, if I click on the timeline, I get all the tween options, and I'm just gonna put one spin in here, right, just to kind of make it easy. And I can hit Control Enter to test it. Going a little fast. We're going to click on here, and we're going to just add a few more frames. There we go. I like the look of that a little bit better. Alright, so I've put the spin on the inside. Now if I double click and go back out to scene 1, and I'm going to add a whole bunch of frames. So right click, insert frame. And I'm going to create a motion tween. And what we're going to do is we're going to go, just kidding, undo. I'm going to go to the very beginning, and I'm just going to put it here. Just doing something really simple. Go to the end, move it there, and we'll go up like this. All right, so real simple animation, and you guys might notice something. It's not spinning. Flash inside the work area can only preview something that's right here on like level 1, right? So if this is the top level and you have to go in a level in order to get the spin, Flash can't preview it out here. It's just not, it's not capable. You have to go Control Test, right? And now you can get the whole movie with all the different levels in it. I call it levels because that's a made up word on my part. Because you have layers for over here, right? Like you can make multiple layers and have things on top of each other there. And we've got a timeline here for the frames for time. So I've decided I call it levels, right? So we go down a level or in a level in order to get in here, and we can get the spin. But this can be really powerful. I mean, it's just is a very silly animation, but you can have like your guys' spaceship in class. The flames were animated inside the movie clip so that you could move the entire spaceship however you wanted, and the rest of the animation was not going to be affected. Sorry. Or butterfly flapping its wings. The wings are on the inside movie clip, and they just flap constantly. It's just one loop. And then you can animate the whole butterfly flying around. Something can be blinking. There's about 100 different things you can do that can be inside a movie clip. And Flash will just loop it ad infinitum. It'll just keep going and going and going and going and going. So that can be a very useful tool for animation. And you guys are going to probably be using a lot of it later on in the semester. All right. The other thing that we can use symbols for, there's one other type of symbol, and this had a lot to do with what we did this week, and that's a button. So I have, it's rather large and it's simple, there's nothing on it yet, button, but I'm going to go convert to symbol. And instead of movie clip, I'm going to say button. I'm going to say start BTN. BTN is the abbreviation for button in Flash. MC would be movie clip. And I hit OK. And so you can see it says button up here. And what's awesome about a button is if I double click on it to go like a level deep into the button, we get this. You can see the timeline is completely different, right? Instead of all the other stuff, it's there's up, over, down, and hit. Don't worry about hit. That's something completely different. But up, over, and down have to do with interactivity, right? Up is simply what it looks like when you're just hanging out and you're not really touching the button. Over is what it looks like when you actually hover your mouse over a button. Flash is going to change it to whatever we put here on that frame of the timeline. And down is what happens when you actually click the button. So, how does this work? Well, this is just like any normal timeline, except it only has 3 different options. So, we're going to right click, insert keyframe. And it needs to be a keyframe because if we want this to be different from this, you have to have keyframes. Regular open-ended frames like this, they'll tween, but see there's a dot right here? So you get a key there, right? So we need keyframe, keyframe. And we're going to change this color to yellow, nice pale yellow. And then we're going to test the movie, or just test. And this is upstate, this is overstate. Up, over, up, over. You'll see also Flash is changing the cursor, right? We go from that cursor to that cursor. That's all in the code. That's not anything you have to do. That's built into Flash, which makes it kind of awesome. Because you don't have to do anything. It just does it automatically. Same with the downstate. We're going to right click, insert keyframe. Now I could have this move down, or I'm actually going to have it click on the link. If we click this chain, it'll constrain proportions, meaning both the height and width will change at the same time. And we're going to have it kind of shrink a little bit, which looks something like this. Hover over it, turns yellow, click, and it shrinks. And again, just a different keyframe, and the downstate, you make it look like this, and every time you click, it's going to look like that. It's going to shrink. Now, I used the color change for over and the shrinking for the downstate because these are very typical changes for these states. They're not the only ones you can use. For example, I accidentally call it a click state a lot because that might be what it used to be called. I'm not sure where I got that from. But one thing I do often is move it down a bit, right? There we go. You can move down, it can shrink. And other than a color change for the overstate, you can have it highlight, a bit of a halo. Sometimes people have a symbol that's in the inside and only that changes color. These are very typical. You guys, if you probably thought about it, how you interact with various interfaces, these are the things that happen. The only other added thing I'd say is on your cell phone, if you click things, oftentimes the phone kind of bzzz a little bit, like the vibration on it goes off. That is feedback you are giving to a user to let them know that they have done a thing, right? And that's very important with anything interactive. You have to give feedback to the user. Otherwise, they just hover over stuff. Let me get rid of this animation for a second. Remove Tween. And we're going to just... There we go. So, right? And I click, and I'm thinking, is something supposed to happen? I don't know, because the mouse isn't changing its cursor, and nothing's highlighting. And this feels like something maybe I should interact with, but nothing's happening. And so by having this feedback, right, color changes and clicking and shrinking and moving, you are telling the user that, yes, in fact, they're reading you. Now, maybe still nothing happens, and that can be like a mess up on the design of your part, but at least now the person knows it's not that their phone isn't working. It's not that they're, something is wrong on their end. And it just keeps users engaged, right? Like one of the most useful parts of a game is just, the sound effects that happen when you click on things, because that keeps people interested and they feel like they're affecting things. The examples I gave you of highlighting colors and then having things, move a little bit when you click on them, those are typical. You don't have to do those things, but you have to know that they're typical so that you know how to break that rule, right? Like you have to know the rules in order to break them. You have to understand what typical design is, because that's the language everyone has. They don't know they have it, right? Typical users have no idea that that's how it always works. They've never thought about it. But if you break away from that, you have to break away from it in a way that they'll still react to properly. All right, and we'll be talking more about interactivity later on. But one more thing I have to show you. Anything with symbols deals with the library. Go to the library. There's a button there. If I go to the other library on the other file, I have two movie clips, right? So what this means is that everything that you make is stored here, which is great. It keeps you organized, all the different pieces of your character. I believe, nope, he doesn't have pieces yet. They'll all be stored here. You could put them in folders, right? There's a folder icon down here. So there's a lot of useful things you can do with this library, including I can open up the one from my character and bring him over here, right? Go back to this library. Yes. All right. So, but what if I want to make multiple buttons, right? So I just do what I usually do, copy, paste, and I go in here, and let's go to the front. And I think, oh, I want to change this color, and so I change, I want one button to be blue and the other button to be green, and they're both changing color. Now one looks different than the other because one is faded out when the other is not, but they've both changed. Why? Well, technically, they're not two separate things. They are both tying back to, let me get rid of this. They are both tying back to this start button, right? They're both, what's basically going on, there we go, is not that you've made separate copies of a thing. These are basically links. They're like links to a web page, and that web page is start button. And the only different information between them is where it's placed on the page, right? So how do I get multiple buttons? I've already done all this work of, hello? There we go. Going upstate, overstate, downstate. Not a lot of work, but if you do something complicated and nice looking, it is. So how do I get multiples of that, but maybe have them different start states, Well, I can go into the library and I can right click on something and I can say duplicate. And instead of calling it start button, I can call it stop button or pause or whatever. And now this is its own separate thing from start, which means I can put it in here and I can double click on it and I can change this. And so now I can have two different buttons with two different start colors, but they both, right? So one's blue, one's green, but they both highlight the same color yellow. And they both move down the same amount, right? So I've just saved myself a lot of work because I don't have to redo that. I could make another one. I could keep going all day. That's the nice thing about the, it would help if I could spell. It's a nice thing about this is that we can just keep going and going and going. I don't have to put this in the scene in order to change it, I can just double click on it and then go into it here and change this to, sure, red. And so now I have 3 different buttons. I will warn you, the library is finicky. If you double click on the word, you just rename the word. Always, always, always. It's not your speed. It's not, you know, Apple users, this is not like because you went too fast or too slow. You always have to double click on the symbol itself, like this little icon, if you want to go into the symbol and change it. Alright, so that's the basics of buttons and movie clips. I know there's a third option, graphic. Don't use that. It's an old holdover from oldie times, and it's not used too much anymore. It's very limiting. I've found it's just way easier to always use a movie clip because all of the things you can do with a movie clip. It just makes life better. Whoops. Oh, that was a button before. There we go. Alright.